Hello, everyone. Welcome. Looks like it's time to get started. Yes. I'm Steve Drummond. I'm the executive producer at NPR News. I've covered education for about 30 years, and I'm delighted to be here today for the hashtag We Are 2023 graduation and grade promotion webinar. We've got a lot to talk about today, and we've got some great panelists to discuss it with. So let me just give you an idea of what we're going to do today and who's joining us, and then we'll go from there. As I said, I'm a senior editor at NPR News since 2000. I've been on and off the education editor there. We cover education nationally with a team of people, and the subjects we're going to talk about today are near and dear to our heart, both in journalism and in people who are interested and passionate about education. And of course, we're here because this is the start of graduation and grade promotion season. And we're coming off, for the third time in a row, we could say this, a year like no other in American education. We're coming out the other end of the pandemic. We're seeing principals and school districts and teachers and parents and students struggling and being challenged in ways that they never have before. And so that's both exciting and creates a lot to talk about. And so that's what we're going to address here today. Notably, the questions about learning loss and the mental health issues that we keep popping up throughout the education system. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's a good time to be talking about that. I can tell you also, we're going to see new test scores coming out, national test scores from the National Assessment of Educational Progress coming out tomorrow that are going to show a dip in history and social studies learning in kids that matches the reading and math challenges that we saw back in the fall. So it's a really good time to be sort of talking about both the challenges and celebrating the accomplishments and the genuine achievements that students and parents and schools have made over the past years. We're being hosted by the Learning First Alliance, a partnership of 13 leading education organizations that represent more than 10 million members dedicated to improving student learning in America's schools. So I say all the time, our challenge at NPR is to cover education nationally, but it is an issue that is the most local issue in the country that comes down to individual parents and individual schools and teachers and classrooms. And so those are some of the sort of, it's sort of always a challenge to look across and look for trends and things that are happening, but also to zoom in on what this means for an individual student and an individual classroom or teacher. Today, we have a great panel to join us here to talk about that. Let me introduce them just in the most brief way. David Griffith joins us. He is Associate Executive Director for Policy and Advocacy at the National Association of Elementary School Principals. He oversees federal and state government relations and efforts to support school leaders. He's played a leading role in promoting multi-metric accountability and comprehensive policies that support a whole child education. Jackie Rodriguez is here. She's CEO of the National Center for Learning Disabilities. She's a longtime special education teacher, department chair. She's former teacher from elementary through high school. And now she's a specialist in education law and policy. NCLD is the leading advocacy organization for people with learning disabilities and attention issues. And today, of course, we're going to talk about the special challenges that students with disabilities have faced over the last 3 years that, it's been tough for every kid, but so much more so for these students and parents and educators as well. Casey Roberts joins us. He's the executive director of New Horizons Regional Education Centers. He's a fifth-generation educator, a former history teacher and high school principal. NHREC is the oldest and largest of 9 regional centers in the Commonwealth of Virginia and serves 6 school divisions and over 1,500 public school students and 1,200 adult learners per year. So again, bringing a very interesting perspective. And Deirdra Hawkes is Director of Programs and Advocacy for the American School Counselors Association, which is, counselors and have, play a key role in all of these challenges that we're going to be talking about. Prior to joining the ACSC staff, she worked as a high school counselor for more than 20 years, including during the pandemic. So she's going to bring that experience to bear in today's discussion. ACSCA supports school counselors' efforts to help students focus on academic, career, and social and emotional development so they can achieve success in school and be prepared to lead fulfilling lives as a responsible member of society. So welcome to the four of you, and let's get into it. Deirdre, I'm going to start off with the first question for you. Can you talk just a little bit overall of what the student population looks like these days and coming out of this very interesting time, and what are some of the key obstacles that students, educators, and communities facing right now?
Well, first, thank you so much for including the American School Counselor Association in this conversation. It's so critical to think about the notion of celebration even now, but our population of students, it's always been really diverse. You think about all the backgrounds, the socioeconomic backgrounds, the ethnic backgrounds, the religious backgrounds, the gender identity backgrounds, all these things. But the one thing that we have in common is we talk about these young people, they aspire to be successful in life. And we know that somehow they're going to take a path, whether it's military, whether it's a 2-year college or 4-year college university, or even going directly to work. They all have plans. And we know during the past few years, those plans have been altered a bit. They've really been shaken when they think about their long and short-term goals. As we think about graduation and promotion, it's always time to reflect and celebrate. But of course, now it's not so much just celebrating in that moment. It's really celebrating the resiliency of the children. It's celebrating the successes of our educators and how they've had to alter how they teach while students alter how they learn. Time to celebrate our families who had to jump in there and do a bit more than they were used to doing. So when students get that end of year report card and they see that check for a promotion, it's not just about getting to that next grade level. It's really thinking about everything they had to do to overcome. And there were so many obstacles in that. You think about the day-to-day challenges of a typical school year, what a student needs to do to be successful in a certain course, the graduation requirements, the promotion requirements, all those little checks that they have to get through. The hurdles can be different depending on the student. Those who have learning challenges, those who have struggles just with feeling connected to the school, those who struggle with being able to communicate and be comfortable with that. Ultimately, it's been tough for students. For some students, it's been a bit tougher than others, more than just the day-to-day struggle. You think about everything else that the pandemic brought to their doorsteps, whether it's the doorsteps of the students or the doorsteps of the educators, because we know that more educators are leaving the profession. We're experiencing shortages everywhere. So these obstacles have been pretty great as we think about the challenges in getting our students to that promotion arena and getting students to graduation day. There have been lots of increased student needs. There haven't been enough resources to go around. We know that folks are working on that. There's still that struggle. But you know what? In spite of those clouds, there are so many rays of sunshine just because of the resiliency that we see in our children. We know that there's a lot that is underneath, those final grade numbers, the stories that they can tell about what their struggles were and what they did to overcome them. So really now we have to be intentional about how we've celebrated our students and what we're doing to celebrate them now, because celebrating them not only means that, we see the struggle, but, we see their strength. So it's really important to think about the obstacles that everyone has faced and take a moment and pause and simply celebrate.
Yeah. Exactly. I want to ask a quick follow-up. Some of our reporting, one of the big challenges that's come out in the last couple of years is the national discussion around student debt, and we've seen college enrollment dip a little bit. But also at the same time, we've seen a renewed focus on community colleges. We've seen a greater acknowledgement, I think, and discussion of the fact that some students there are rich and rewarding jobs out there that may not involve a four-year degree. And I just wonder how your organization and how the job of guidance counselors is changing to kind of reflect that.
Well, the role of the school counselor is truly comprehensive, and we acknowledge all the paths that students need to take to fulfill whatever it is their goals are. And we affirm our students simply by respecting their interest, helping them to explore what's around them, helping them to be able to connect the dots, whether those dots lead to the military, whether those dots lead to a four-year institution, or whether those dots lead them to an apprenticeship that'll take them right to where they want to be. Career exploration is essential. The pandemic has really opened the eyes, not for just students, but their parents as well. What they thought of as the only way to go before, they've truly had to rethink that and understand that success can be found in many different corners.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move on a little bit. A question for Jackie. The past 20 years, and certainly the past 3 years, have seen changes in big change in the number of students with learning disabilities. And I guess the pandemic has seen different challenges and different questions that parents and those students have. How has the last few years affected your world and affected these students and their families and teachers?
So like Deirdra, I want to say how grateful we are to be at this table and having this conversation. It's so incredibly important and affirming to hear how people with disabilities are being included in conversations they have been previously excluded from. And so NCLD has been tracking a lot of what's been happening, not only with students with disabilities, but our young adults as well. So they go into post-secondary transition and into the workforce, and they think about their future life outcomes. I'll specifically think about three things with regard to the pandemic and then what students with disabilities have been navigating for the last several years. We've all likely heard about the science of reading and the discussion around how that is impacting all students in schools. I'm pleased and proud, honestly, to say as a special educator that reading instruction, birthed from the special education field, has been very, very robust. And we're really excited about the discussion around the science of reading, where we can provide that type of support to all students. That has been, I think, primary on educators' focus recently, as well as legislators' focus. And we would like to see all students receive that high quality reading instruction that most special education students have already received over the last several decades due to evidence-based research. So that's one area that we're seeing a lot of traction, legislative and policy initiatives around. The other I want to highlight is around identification for students with learning disabilities in particular. Many people in the special education and exceptional education world have seen a renewed focus on identification, specifically because of the pandemic. We were all concerned not only about either learning loss or gaps in knowledge, but also how we were going to identify students throughout the pandemic and whether we were going to over or under identify students, just given all of the variables that Deirdra just spoke to and my colleagues will speak to after me. And so part of that identification includes multi-tiered systems of support and response to intervention. And we're excited about how schools are engaging those practices and how we can provide professional development to ensure that students are actually receiving great instruction in these tiered systems, that teachers are all involved in the identification of a student with a disability, and that the parents are at the table from the very beginning as we discuss identification. I'll also just mention, part of a specific learning disability identification means a ruling out of other variables. And so as you can imagine, the pandemic created a host of concerns around those variables interrelating with identification processes. So, we're working with schools as well as with legislators to really tease out what it means to have a learning disability and how we can support all students and ensure that students are receiving great instruction while also not necessarily being over-identified in an area that they may not actually have a disability in. And so finally, last piece I want to mention, because, Steve, you just talked about the NAEP data being released yesterday, and we're eager, as I think my colleagues are, to hear more about what that looks like. The NAEP data in 2019 that was collected did not show a ton of progress for kids with disabilities. And in particular, grade 12 NAEP data hasn't been administered since the pandemic, but it was. And in 2019, the score difference between those with learning disability and those without was 23 points different in reading and 33 points difference in math. So as you can imagine, there's a great deal of work we need to be doing to ensure that it's not simply identifying students that have a disability in a school system, but providing them the type of inclusion support, general education support, accommodations that they need to not only access, but really be successful with that curriculum so that we can actually shorten that gap between math and reading scores. And those scores also indicate what that looks like for post-secondary supports. So what is their college experience going to look like? What is their vocation experience going to look like? And we're going to be focusing a lot on what that NAEP data suggests coming out tomorrow.
Excellent. A follow-up question. One of the things that we keep seeing is a recurring discussion of teacher shortages around the country, and always, every single time, the need for special education teachers comes up. What do you see are the bright spots, or what do you see the policy levers that are being brought into place to kind of address this situation?
Well, we have a toolkit, as we've said in education, across a variety of mediums. And our toolkit for teacher shortages includes not one, but many, many ways of encouraging people to come into the field. One of those tried and true evidence-based ways is to support students through this financial endeavor that you spoke to earlier around student debt. So we have things like the Department of Education's Teach Grants, which allow students to come into a high need specialty field like special education, and they get support annually through the Teach Grant, and they then provide a service to that community in which they teach. They promise to teach in a Title I school in that high needs area of special ed for a period of years in order to receive that Teach Grant. We also have a variety of other types of partnerships with the department. Teacher quality partnership grants are through a university. And if a university has a TQP, you could be a resident, which I'm a huge supporter of, because residents in education receive intensive instruction for a period of years, as well as full-time work in a school that they start the year off, they end the year out, they start at the beginning of the day, they end the day, and they're full-time teaching with the support of a master mentor teacher, and they are paid for their time. So they're not simply giving up those 2 years in order to provide a service, but they also receive a livable wage. And then most recently, perhaps NPR has already reported on this, but there's an eager interest in apprenticeships, which I think my colleague Casey is going to speak to in just a few minutes. So apprenticeships have been around for ages. We have them even in, my dad was an engineer. There is an apprenticeship in aerospace engineering. So this is something that we really should take hold of. Now we have apprenticeships in teaching. And so we are at the very beginning stages of what that looks like nationally, as well as in the state level apprenticeship field. But we're seeing more and more interest in supporting students coming into the field of special education through these variety of financial methods to encourage their participation in education, because we all know people are interested in becoming teachers. There's no lack of interest, but rather we need a livable wage, and we want to make sure that people walk out of their preparation programs without the type of debt that is necessary to have 2 and 3 jobs at a time.
Great, thank you. And you're doing my job for me. You had a great segue to Casey there. So let's turn to you, Casey. How is New Horizons preparing students for their future? And could you talk a little bit about apprenticeships and the role they can play, and how schools can work with employers to get kids ready for high-paying jobs?
Absolutely. Again, and I just want to reiterate, thank you again for inviting New Horizons to the table. We're doing some great work at New Horizons. We serve 6 school divisions and a various amount of specialized programming, specifically career and technical education. So we have juniors and seniors that are training to be the next generation building constructors, plumbers, cult chefs, and nurses. So at New Horizons, really what we focus on is aligning the students' goals, talents, and gifts with career pathways that are strong possibilities for them to consider going into post-secondary world. We also look at ways to strengthen partnerships between parents and the schools in the field of apprenticeships, meaning that apprenticeships there's a great interest for apprenticeships in the community, but there is very little knowledge about what is accessible to students coming out of the K-12 system. Even when you're out in the post-secondary world, there is still great interest, but low understanding or knowledge of the accessibility of apprenticeships that one, pay a livable wage, like my colleague Jacqueline said, or even a wraparound service. Another thing is coming about in the post-secondary world is childcare. Childcare is a really big iceberg that is coming down the pike that we need to solve for people that have young children. How can they access apprenticeships, the livable wage, and also take care of their young ones as well? One thing at New Horizons, we have a transition to employment program that we like to call the Good Life Solution Program. And how that title has come about is we help students gain access through apprenticeships and through employment with employers we bring in and work with to pull talent directly out of the K-12 systems. How do they access the good life? And we have hundreds of students that are involved in that program, and we work with employers that offer apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, and employment opportunities before they leave high school. So many of our students that are coming through our programs that are involved in the Good Life Solution Program have access contingent offers with employers for full-time work and full-time benefits, and then they are getting jobs before they even get their high school diploma. And some of these kids are coming out, they're making more than first-year teachers coming out of college. So when you start talking about the brass tacks of the importance of apprenticeships and trades and the access to livable wages and more, the importance of apprenticeships in the K-12 sector and post-secondary is essential to building that next generation workforce for the future. And additionally, what we do at New Horizons, we help eliminate assumptions that people come to the table with about apprenticeships, whether it be parents or whether it be employers, about considering the K-12 sector as a viable talent pipeline for their hiring needs. So we track students in 4 categories. We call them the 4 E's. We track them when they go straight to employment, they go into the military, enlist, enroll in a post-secondary opportunity, whether it be community college or a 4-year institution or an outside trade school. And then the new E that's is on the rise with the Gen Z population is entrepreneurship. So a lot of students are coming out and they want to start businesses centered around what they've learned in school, the trades, or what they've learned in pre-apprenticeship programs or apprenticeship programs. But we need to understand as a society that a college degree is not the only golden ticket to the American dream, and that there are lots of students that are figuring out that, maybe I don't want to take on all this debt to get a degree that doesn't guarantee a job. Maybe I should focus on my gifts and talents, focus on developing skills in the trades that could be an alternative pathway to a college degree. And that is where the conversation starts with parents, because parents are still pushing students to college degree. But now we're having conversations that, hey, we have an alternative pathway through apprenticeships and through the trades that could get you to a college education, because the businesses will pay for it if you have that trade and you go to work for them. And so this is a very viable option for hundreds, thousands of students coming out of the high schools. And we need to remember that high schools or the K-12 sector, thousands of kids are coming out. And in order for us to get them into the next generation positions and workforce that is quickly aging, apprenticeships is that vehicle by which we connect the dots and build that bridge from K-12 to post-secondary opportunities. Fascinating.
I have one follow-up question to that, which in some of our reporting, it's kind of come up, just what you just said, that often parents have been some of the ones who have been sort of not willing to discuss options that don't involve a 4-year degree. and I was going to ask you specifically, we found that especially in communities of color where people are very suspicious of their children being diverted into a path that they perceive as not leading towards a 4-year degree. But it seems to me, and I was going to ask you about this, that perception may be changing a little bit now. And I wonder if you're seeing that in your work.
Oh, absolutely. Once we start talking about the brass tacks of how much these students can make over time and initially right out of high school, we have a mechatronics program that we do in dual enrollment program with our local community college. Students are leaving with that mechatronics certification making $60,000 to $70,000 a year straight out of high school. So when you start talking about to the parent, hey, your child could have a full-time job with benefits. They're not on your insurance. They're not living with you. And oh, by the way, they can take you out to dinner anytime you ask. And it builds that maturity. And what we're seeing also is that a lot of the students coming out of the K-12 sector are just not ready or prepared for the rigors of a 4-year college. That maturity level is not there. Not saying that their potential for getting a 4-year college degree isn't possible, but the maturity level is not there, or the supports are not there. Getting a job, working through and having a salary and having benefits and living on your own builds that maturity that they'll be more prepared for a 4-year college program than they were coming straight out of high school. So talking about the brass tacks with parents and less debt and more earning potential over time, that is where we're seeing the pendulum swing away from, hey, maybe my child's not ready for college. Maybe they need to go into trade. And then later on, they go off to college and still achieve the same dream that the parent had in the initial part without the debt and without strain to supports that they may have at home.
Great. Thank you. And now to turn to David Griffith, which is a good place to kind of summarize some of this, because time and time again over decades, we've seen the role that school principals play in the success of a school, this vital role. David, how do elementary educators view graduation and promotion, and sort of how are you seeing your members sort of adapting and changing coming out of this very strange period?
Yes, strange indeed. So our members are elementary school principals, so it is that time of year, and they're getting ready for their what we call promotion or moving up ceremonies, and they're important to the schools, are important to the school leaders, are certainly important to the students, as important as graduation, as iconic as that milestone is. Our leaders are thinking about this in terms of endings and new beginnings. These are important milestones, and I think we've got a new appreciation for that now, of being able to come together, of being able to celebrate, of being able to sort of see that progress over time, celebrating accomplishments. But it's not without some bittersweetness. It is sending these students off to to the middle school. It also is a reminder too, as I mentioned earlier about the graduation piece. It's a reminder that the foundation for graduation just doesn't happen in high school. It starts throughout the entire K-12 system, certainly at the beginning, and that it's really a journey of students' progress is a journey and really a continuum, just like learning is. And for elementary school educators and leaders, it's one of providing support and transitions to them. So. Those are just top of mind issues. Also, in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, it is, like I said, celebrating accomplishments, but it's also, being mindful of the students and easing the anxiety they have of moving on, of, seeing new faces, new teachers, new settings, and then behind the scenes working on the transitions with their colleagues at other schools to make sure that, they know as much as they can about the students that are coming to them. Our educators and leaders have seen over the course of multiple years. And so the last thing I would say too is it's also in some ways gives them the satisfaction of a job well done. But we've heard from a number of our members too, as they get further in their careers. Around this time of year, when they celebrate these students, they also have some anxiety themselves about, what more could they have done? And especially I think in, the past couple of years, what more could we have done for the students to sort of maximize their opportunities and their successes. And then just, again, last thing is just, I said about endings and beginnings. It's a reminder too of, the next school year is going to be starting. There's going to be a new class of students. It's an opportunity to start fresh, and that there's constantly opportunities to grow. And I think that's true for both students and we're educators and school staff.
I wonder, we've seen, I'm going to jump off this horse in a minute, but I'm still very concerned. We've seen over the last few years a lot of veteran and senior teachers deciding, that the Zoom years and all of that it's time to leave. I wonder how principals are adapting to dealing with possibly newer staff members or a shortage of staff members, and what your organization is doing to kind of support and help them along that path.
Yeah, there's a number of things with that. The shortages and vacancies are really nothing new. I think it's just an order of magnitude larger, and also what we're seeing, it's more across the board, as you know, and my colleagues know. We've always had shortages in certain subjects, in certain grades, and certain geographic areas. And then we're just seeing more and more of that. It's just, around the country. And it's been, high poverty schools, high poverty school districts, and also rural areas too. So they're doing the best they can. For rural areas in particular, when it comes to staff or like school counselors, there just simply aren't available candidates. So, they have to come up with innovative ways. In some ways, what we're doing here on Zoom with the webinars, thinking about new ways to, again, tap into that access. But I would say too, in terms of the teacher shortages, I want to put a plug out there too, because I think, that is the tip or the initial wave. And I think what we want to be careful about and what we're trying to work on now is the following departure of school leaders and principals.
Oh yeah.
We did a recent survey and found that at least of those respondents, 70% said that they were seriously thinking about leaving in the next 2 to 3 years. So while the teacher and staff shortages are top of mind right now, we're certainly scrambling about that, we want to try to start replenishing the pipeline now so that we're not facing we're not scrambling 2 or 3 years from now to fill these leadership roles, because as like the students have had sort of mental health and well-being issues and challenges, so too have educators, and really school leaders have borne the brunt of that as really the fulcrum in their school communities as leaders of serving both the students and the families and their communities and also their staff. They are really sort of burned out at this point. So getting them to be recharged, but also thinking about how we replenish. Again, while we replenish the educator pipeline, how we can replenish that educator pipeline so we're not in the same situation or crisis a couple of years from now.
Agreed. Thank you. And I'm going to come back to some of those themes that you just touched on. I really appreciate it. I want to move on just a little bit. I have a question for David and Jackie, for both of you. Maybe Jackie, we'll start with you. But just what are the key efforts or levers that you see out there just right now, tools that are that we can use to get more kids ready for promotion and graduation?
Sure. So let's start first with the data on kids with disabilities as compared to their able-bodied peers. If we looked at the data from 2020, 2021, the most recent data that we have currently, we have about an 82% graduation rate for kids with specific learning disabilities. If we look at that same data, it's an 86.5% graduation rate for other students. So the discrepancy there, while may not look significant to the layperson, 4 to 5 points percentage rate is a huge amount of students that we're missing. And especially students who have over the last several decades been more and more included in the general education setting. So they're receiving quality instruction in the general education curriculum, but they're not graduating at the same rates as their peers. So let's start with the premise that we absolutely do need to do something about it. One of the ways in which we can address promotion and graduation for success with kids with disabilities is through transition planning. So my colleagues on the call are all familiar with transition planning. We try our best to ensure that at either age 16, which is legally required by IDEA, the federal legislation, or at age 14, which is the preponderance of states adoption, that every student comes to the table during their IEP meeting and discusses what are their goals? What do they want to see with regard to their post-secondary outcomes? And Deirdre spoke to this eloquently earlier, how valuable it is to listen to the student in that transition planning and what they would like to hear, and how important it is also to have that parent stakeholder at the table. The dilemma NCLD has noticed in focus groups recently is that students have not actually been listened to at the table at the depth and breadth that they are seeking. And so we're encouraging all of our young adults to be self-advocates at those tables and to really ensure that their voice is heard. So one thing we can do is to ensure that students are an integral part of that transition planning. And that includes, as Casey mentioned, career and technical education and vocational training that they may want to pursue. The other piece I want to think about is another set of outcomes from our recent focus groups led this past February is a mindset shift from deficit to strength-based approach. So I know most principals and most teachers are already thinking about this with their students. They're looking at what they come to the table with and what value they add, as opposed to identifying all the areas in which they need additional support. But that's something that our young adults experienced in their education, and they are encouraging all educators to really come to the table with that strength-based approach. We know it's just really good teaching, and that everybody wants to be coming into the conversation that way. Additionally, we're trying to talk about closing knowledge gaps across constituent groups. So, for example, like knowledge on rights, on general advocacy, and misrepresentations or myths around disability in school systems would be hugely helpful. And then a systems change approach. So I'll just end on this one piece. We have been working on early warning systems for students across the country with regard to graduation rates. These are systems in place in high schools primarily, but they can be across elementary through high school. And part of that system is like a check engine light for what I mentioned earlier, the multi-tiered systems of support. It ensures that we're really addressing student needs from the very beginning. And so as we think about promotion and graduation, we should also be considering how do we really, with fidelity, implement these early warning systems across all of our schools.
Thank you. David, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say just a couple things that we're working on and promoting, and I think it ties in with this success for students across the K-12 spectrum, but also enhances graduation, which is in the elementary level we say it's important to get a strong start, and that's true at the elementary level too. It applies to universal preschool and how important that is for students to enhance those neural network creations, just get socialization and interaction. It's so important when they begin, kindergarten to sort of have that basic foundation to start. Obviously reading, someone mentioned earlier the NAEP reading results that came out, I guess last year now. 2022, there was a dip. I think the surprise of it was that people were surprised coming out of COVID and virtual schooling or hybrid or what have you. I pleasantly surprised that there was only 3 points. I mean, in the scheme of things, and it's not looking at this in long-term trends, but this was a blip in time. But I do think emphasizing reading as well, because what we see is only 4% of students that aren't reading proficiently in third grade fail to complete high school, and that changes for students that aren't reading at proficiency. By the end of third grade, 1 in 6 aren't going to complete high school in time. So I mean that's a really important inflection point right there, a really gate that we've got to focus on there. The other two things I would say is the universal school meals. We saw that again during the pandemic. 52% of students are eligible for free or reduced price meals. Our members talk about that during that time as the opportunity to give all students a meal at school was a game-changing development, and sorely disappointed that it's we've reverted back to that. I also think too it was an aha moment for the public to realize not only were schools developing their students academically, social, emotionally, but oh, by the way, oftentimes the school day was the one and only time they actually got a nutritious meal, which is again just hard to think about. And then lastly, I would just say funding, and I don't look, money doesn't solve all things, but it certainly helps. And what we're seeing is current federal funding is at FY 2011 levels, if adjusted for inflation. And again, if what we've seen over the past couple of years has really exposed challenges, inequities, in addition, systemically that have been there for a while, in addition to all the new challenges that COVID has piled on top in terms of, unrealized learning, and again, the need to sort of get back into the normalcy of things. So, that's also an important investment. The American Rescue Plan funding is going to be running out. We've hired staff and personnel, and that after 2024, that those positions are going to have to be paid in some way. But again, the after effects, the impact on students is not going away that fast. So I think that's also an investment we've got to double down on. So those are, again, all those are contributing factors to maintain the high and hopefully boost the graduation rate, which is the highest in U.S. history right now.
Excellent, thank you. I want to just follow up on what you said and ping that over to Deirdra. We've seen this funding about to run out, but that was able to be applied to some of the key areas like counselors and school psychologists and nurses and some of the many, many support staff that we've seen. And I just wonder, going forward, what do you see as the picture of in terms of focusing kids on graduation? Do we have the people that we need, and what are the needs or what are the challenges?
Well, I certainly appreciate all of David's comments, because they're so critical in thinking about what the future holds for getting our students there, and what we need to do here now and in the present to secure the support that they need. I think you'll be hard pressed to find any state to say that they have all the personnel they need to support our children in the way they need to be supported. Alone, just in school counseling, data shows us, the national average for the student to school counselor ratio is 408 to 1. We recommend 250 to 1 because students need so much support, even more so now. They need to have the learning strategies that it takes to be successful students, to get the results they want to see, not only in testing, but in their courses that they take. They need the self-management skills. They need to be able to navigate challenges and be able to cope with them. They need the social skills. And so within school counseling itself, we do not have enough school counselors to go around. And it's really critical because without the support that they need, students aren't able to get the access and support to get them to the place that they want to be. So it's a really tough time right now for all of us. And it's certainly not island work to get students to graduation day. It's not just on the shoulders of school counselors, it's not just on the shoulders of the classroom teachers, not just on the shoulders of our school building and district leaders. Everyone here has to make an investment, because we don't have all of the personnel that we need to offer the children all the resources that they require at this point. We need all hands on deck from the community. We need for folks to consider new possibilities and different ways to approach helping to meet students' needs. It's a constant investment We need our state and our federal lawmakers to consider these things as they're looking at their budgets, as they're making those critical decisions, because really the investment now is not just about healing the learning loss and giving the mental health support that students need, but it's really overall big picture helping to position them so that they can be productive, so that they can experience success and whatever they see success looking like for them. So we're not where we want to be right now. We certainly want to remain hopeful, and we all stay in a place to look for the help and secure it for our students. We have some wonderful educators out there who are really circling the wagon and doing all that they can. And really, it is tiresome, but truly ask them, and it's certainly a labor of love, but we do need to acquire more help for our students.
Great, thank you. And Casey, Deirdra talked about communities, and seems like you're kind of on the cutting edge or on the cusp of involving the communities in the outcomes of the schools, so that the diploma isn't just a piece of paper, but it's a thing that says that those skills that the student is gaining align with what the businesses and companies in the community need. And can you talk about how can other communities that don't have the benefit of New Horizons sort of learn from that, or establish those connections between the community and the business world and the schools and what they're teaching and preparing students for?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say start small, but start. And I think that organizations that want to get into this particular area to kind of bridge the gap between K-12 and the industry, or K-12 and whatever post-secondary opportunity, is that just starting the work small will lead to greater outcomes going forward. So just giving an example about apprenticeships is that we link prep with access. So we're on the K-12 side are prepping the students to be prepared to go into the workspace, and the employer is working with us to give more access. So when you talk about apprenticeships, there are two factors that I like to talk about when developing apprenticeship programs, or in any program that deals with students going into the workplace to learn, and that is quality and scale. I do not want to place students in a makeshift program that is not high quality and is not scalable, because I don't like it, or from an equity standpoint, a small group of students may get access to these opportunities, but not all. So when we talk about the development of apprenticeship programs, it has to be quality, and it also has to be scalable. And those are the kind of the two factors by which we gauge when building these types of programs. And also on the prep side, what we do, when you hear out in the community, you hear on NPR News, you hear on all the local news, that we need to develop these soft skills, and we like to say professional skills, but there's such a long list of professional skills. If you think about, through our careers, what skills do we have to develop to get to where we are, is not just, these couple of things, but when you're talking about ready to learn entry-level graduates, which that is our niche, we have kind of scaled it down to three big things. Attendance, and we call them the 3 A's. Attendance, show up. You have to show up on time. That's the big thing. And I would say that attendance is the biggest indicator of success post-secondary that would trump GPA, showing up. The second one is attitude, having an attitude of, I'm here to learn. I don't know everything. Although I have a device that gives me all the knowledge in the world, I need to be able to turn that data into information that's usable, and I can make a living off of that. And thirdly is being approachable, being teachable, being coachable. And those are the three things that we focus on when developing and prepping the students to be prepared for the 21st century workforce. And then on the access side, I have three shining examples of industries that have really developed these programs. And we like to put our eggs in our basket here at New Horizons in pre-apprenticeships, because there are lots of barriers when you're talking about students between the ages of 16 and 18, child protection laws from working, liability insurance. Those are some of the barriers that employers are dealing with. So we'd like to say, let's do a step down approach and do a pre-apprenticeship where they're getting their feet wet, you are opening your doors and giving them those opportunities, but it's not a full-blown registered apprenticeship. That's the high-hanging fruit. Those are those are like the gold standard of apprenticeships. So we have our big industry in our area is maritime and a lot of shipbuilding. So we work with the largest employer in the state of Virginia, and we developed with them something called the Youth Builders Program, where we get students interested in the maritime trades. They actually go on site of this employer, and they're actually learning the curriculum of the apprenticeship program that they have there. So that it gives them a full year of a pre-apprenticeship, and then they get advanced standing. If they want to go into the apprenticeship school at this particular location, they get advanced standing or preferential placement into the apprenticeship school. Another one is the IBEW, working with the local IBEW union. They have a space inside one of our facilities, and our electrical program is located in the same space. So they actually pull high school students, get them trained in the curriculum that adults are learning. And so they're a year ahead of students that are coming straight off the street, getting involved in the IBEW union. And that is a pre-apprenticeship program, and we do it on site during the school day. So we eliminate a lot of barriers when it comes to that transportation and those types of things, because they're already here. And then finally, our Public Works Academy, where we're working with local public work localities to fill a lot of their positions that, you're talking about people that fix our sewer lines, that fix our main water lines, that fix our electrical lines. They're pulling the talent right out of New Horizons in a pre-apprenticeship model of getting them interested, helping them to apply their learning in the classroom and apply those professional skills, showing up, having a good attitude, and being approachable directly in the workforce. And about building that bridge and starting small, because we definitely started small, and they're becoming more scalable, and we're impacting more students. That is how communities can build that bridge between K-12 and businesses, and also show the businesses the return on investment. If they invest in this model of starting small, and they're seeing the talent that comes out and the outcomes of students, then that's a win-win for everyone.
Fascinating. I've been covering education for almost 30 years now. And right now, I think one of the most interesting stories that I'm seeing out there is these efforts that you just described. It sounds so cool, of just sort of getting away from this traditional notion of that the high school diploma is leading to a four-year college, and all these exciting innovations out there that you're talking about this. I want to shift gears a little bit and toss out a question to all four of you and see where it goes. During the pandemic in the last 3 years, we've seen a level of parents' involvement in their schools, perhaps not willing, but nevertheless, parents having to be involved in the education of their children in ways and to a degree that they haven't been before. And I'm sure that's created both challenges, but also it seems to me there might be opportunities as well. And I wondered to throw that out to the group and see what you've seen. Jackie, might be a good place to start with you. I see you nodding, and I know that no parents are more involved than the parents of students with disabilities. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I'll say, as a parent, it's not a competition who can be more involved, but rather getting everybody to the table is our biggest effort. And so it's thrilling actually to see how the pandemic has shifted parents' orientation toward school systems and also towards teachers and their tremendous value in a student's life. And I think we're seeing more and more parents get involved now because they are eager to see their outcomes of their students, and they recognize just how deeply embedded teachers are with their students throughout the day. There's actually a national organization called NAFSCE, the National Association of School Community and Family Engagement, that works specifically to bring parents, caregivers, and community members to the table to ensure that schools have as much engagement as possible with our colleagues. But yes, to your point, kids with disabilities in particular have just a robust advocacy tool with their parents and their caregivers by their side. And we're thrilled to have them not just at the table talking with teachers, but what I think we really love in truth is the way that teachers collaborate with our parents. There are so many things that a teacher is required to do during the school day, and then additional requests that are made of them. It's nearly impossible for them to be the perfect individual for every single student. And so as much as we can get parents working in collaboration with those teachers to specifically work with our kids with disabilities in the classroom, the better off everybody is. Everybody gets access to that great instruction. So thanks for that question.
how did I mute myself? David or Deirdre, notion or thoughts on this changing, I mean, this very different role that parents were asked to play and the long tail of that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I would just I'm sorry. Let me just jump in and just say ditto to what Jackie had said. Look, parents are their children's first teacher. They are absolutely essential partners to schools for student success, and it's a positive development. We encourage it. We welcome parents into the school, and parents and educators working together for the success of these individual students is an unstoppable force. So. And I would say, I mentioned earlier too, again, one of the things also, it's we welcome them into the schools. They know their children as best of all, and helpful to have them share sort of, what they see and what they know about their children to help teachers. But I also think too, also in terms of just engagement, like, parent teacher conferences no longer have to be in person. They no longer have to be during the school day. So again, if there's any of these silver linings that come out of this, it is thinking differently about how we conduct some of these things, and also how we're able to engage with more parents in a variety of ways. So I'm sorry, Deirdre, I just wanted to jump in and echo what Jackie.
That's great. I appreciate that, David, because parents are truly our partners always. I don't think I have ever received as many notes of gratitude as I did once children had to stay home. Parents had to learn new skills. They had to be the teachers at home, and the floods of phone calls and the emails. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But they learned how to be successful with it. And I think they brought back to the table an even greater understanding of what it takes for their children to be successful, and they became better advocates for them as well. So, although a really tough time, there is some good that has come from this. And I think now more than ever, we keep that partnership going, and for as much as we can, keep them involved in such a way.
By no means do I want to sugarcoat the difficulties that people faced during the pandemic, but it seemed like some of these tools that came out of it that like you just said, David, parent-teacher conferences, or the ability of a teacher to send a text message. It seems like all of these, there are new tools and new ways of communication that are coming to bear that are really enabling educators to focus on this. The reason we're here today, to talk about graduation and promotion. Anyway, I wonder if any of you have thoughts on that. Except, yes, that's a good thing.
It's a great thing. And I want to just highlight something that we have done at New Horizons that really brings together parents and students, is that at the end of their senior year at New Horizons, we do a career selection day where we're applauding and celebrating students, their choice of going to the workforce. And we're doing it sort of like an NFL draft day, where they're going up, they're putting on the hat of their employer, and their parents and the community leaders, politicians are there applauding them. Is not just applauding those that are going off to college, but is applauding the entire spectrum of what students are deciding to do with their career pathways. And that is really building up parents to say, I have an important part in developing a student, whether they go to college or into the workforce. And we're here to celebrate all students and all parents of different walks of life.
It's funny you mentioned that, and it echoes something Deirdre said a little while ago. I've attended a graduation ceremony in which it was really great efforts to point out the students who were going into the military, or the students who are going, and celebrating that, rather than sort of just this sort of laser focus on four-year colleges. I think that's really, really fascinating. I know we're coming right down to the end of our time here. So in radio, we call that hitting the post, which is a very important thing to do in radio, is not run over. So I just want to summarize by saying how much of a pleasure it's been to talk to you and hear you all talk about it. I have a whole list of story ideas, which is the thing that I get out of these discussions as well. Anybody have a last thought or a last comment before we go? I think we're at time. We may be time to ring it. So thank you all very much.